But first to the one in the Middle East, where the White House is taking a hands-off approach to Israel's renewed military threats. A Hamas delegation is in Cairo for new talks on ending the Gaza war. Over the last few days, Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have been talking up a comprehensive deal to secure the release of all hostages, alive and dead, to end the fighting and to address Gaza's post-war governance. Every day the war continues, Israel's isolation grows as Palestinians die from Israeli attacks and from a lack of food and aid. The United Nations now warns that starvation in Gaza is at the highest level since the fighting began. The hostages are also still stuck in this hellish condition. Recently, Arab and Muslim states, including Saudi Arabia, issued a joint call for Hamas to relinquish power in Gaza as part of efforts to end the war. Veteran diplomat Prince Turkey Al-Faisal has deep experience in the region. He served as Saudi Arabia's ambassador to the US and the UK. He was also head of Saudi Arabia's main foreign intelligence unit. So welcome back to our program.
Thank you, Ms. Amanpour. It's good to be back with you.
So there's so much to discuss about the military and political, but I want to first ask you whether you think that anything is possible to actually accomplish without an immediate halt to the massive humanitarian catastrophe, starvation, the dying of famine and hunger, the shooting of Palestinians who try to get to these highly mismanaged aid operations. Do you think anything can really be done without that being addressed first?
Well, it needs the United States to put its foot down. You know, in past history, America has put its foot down several times. I remind you when President Eisenhower forced the British, the French, and the Israeli to withdraw from Egypt during the Suez Crisis. And I remember when Mr. George Herbert Walker Bush forced Israel to attend the Madrid conference for a peace conference there. When Mr. Clinton at the Wye River talks forced Mr. Netanyahu himself to agree to the proposals put on the table at that time. So the U.S. has to put its foot down to prevent this genocide that is taking place at the hands of a psychopath. That's the only way I can describe him. He is using the American cudgel to beat everybody up, not just the Palestinians, but to prevent others from doing good for not just the Palestinians, but for the whole area.
So I assume when you use those words, obviously the Israelis would deny that, but I assume you're talking about Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I wonder what you're talking about, stopping others doing good as well. Do you mean yourself? I mean, in terms of Saudi Arabia and the Arab states?
No, I'm talking about the rest of the world. The kingdom and the Arab states are doing their best. They're the ones who got the rest of the world now to recognize the state of Palestine as deemed by the United Nations Security Council resolutions. And as the mandate that was put after the First World War initially proposed that there should be a Palestinian state. So the kingdom and its Arab partners are doing their best. It's the rest of the world that needs things to be done, and particularly the United States government.
Prince Turkey Al-Faisal, as you probably know because you probably read him, the veteran Haaretz columnist Gideon Levy, who's done a lot of work on the Palestinian side and has reported a lot of what's going on, he actually came out with this. Recognition is hollow lip service that the hesitant and weak European governments are using to show their enraged public that they're not holding their silence. People are being starved in Gaza, and Europe's reaction is to recognize a Palestinian state. Will this save starving Gazans? Israel can ignore these declarations with the U.S. support. So you've just talked about how the U.S. needs to use its leverage. But do you believe that it's a hollow statement?
I don't. If I did, I would not have asked you and told you that the Arab states worked for that, and I think it's important. It shows the isolation of the United States and Israel in the world, and in as much as it had impact on the European public to come around and support a Palestinian state, to force their governments to do that, hope it will work in the same way with the United States public and with the Israeli public. We see the opinion in Israel is changing as far as Mr. Netanyahu is concerned. There are now more Israelis who want him to step down than support him. In the United States, the hundreds of thousands of people who demonstrate in the streets and calling for a Palestinian state are indication that the tide is turning there. So I don't think it is hollow. Not only that, but by recognizing a Palestinian state with a border in the 67 borders as proposed by the UN Security Council resolutions 242 and 338, there will be a definition of what Israel cannot do on the West Bank, for example, and Gaza. And that will force the Europeans to take more defined action against what Israel is doing. There will have to be economic consequences. There will have to be military consequences. They have to stop supplying Israel with military hardware and other actions like that. And this is, I think, what the Arab world is seeking, not just from the Europeans, but also from the United States.
So you know that recently the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, did something quite extraordinary, suspended weapons supplies to Israel. And obviously, given the terrible history of Germany, Nazi Germany, regarding the Jewish people, people took notice of what he did. I want to ask you to react to what Netanyahu and his allies say. Recognizing a Palestinian state is, quote unquote, rewarding the terrorists, rewarding Hamas. Do you believe that do you think that it would be a reward for Hamas, whether you call it a reward or not? Or do you think that it would isolate Hamas? In other words, does Hamas want a two-state solution?
Well, if you look at what the Saudi Arabia and France, for example, and the other countries that made a proposition recently at the United Nations to end the fighting in Gaza, they stipulated that Hamas must be disarmed. They condemned Hamas's actions on October 7th, and they were very specific about what needs to be done of getting back the Palestinian Authority to rule, not just in Hamas, but also in the West Bank. So there is a different story to the one that Mr. Netanyahu is proposing. There is no reward for Hamas here. Hamas is a terrorist organization that deserves to be outcast from any activity or rule in Palestine. But I would also add that Mr. Netanyahu himself is a terrorist who should be kicked out of office in Israel, and yet nobody is calling for his removal and his resignation and his trial according to the International Court of Justice.